Nigeria's federal government intends to launch the Risking Fund in May 2025 to ease access to affordable loans for micro, small and medium enterprises. Now, the special advisor to the president on Job Creation and MSMEs, Temitola Adekunle-Johnson, announced this on Saturday in Abuja. The fund, a risk-sharing initiative between state governments and banks, aims to lower lending rates currently hovering between 28% and 30%. And Adekunle-Johnson also reviewed plans to expand MSME shared facility hubs across Nigeria to enhance access to modern equipment. The initiative has so far supported over 120,000 MSMEs nationwide. So we'll find out that truth from our guest this morning on the show, Dr. Femi Egbesola, who is the President of the Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria. Thank you so much, Dr. Egbesola, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So before we even consider the impacts that government interventions have had in the sector for over a couple of years now, let's start from the basics. What exactly is a de-risking fund, and what will it function, or how will it function rather, in Nigeria's SME landscape?
All right. As the name implies, the Risking Fund is a fund provided to reduce the risk of a particular sector. This time around, we are talking of the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector or ecosystem. Before now, banks have not been willing to lend to the MSMEs because they consider them as high risk. So the Risking Fund is now to reduce the risk so that more banks will be interested in giving funds to MSMEs. Investors who will not now be interested in funding MSMEs, knowing that the risk will now be shared. When it comes to the Risking Fund, it is possible that government is sharing 50% of the fund, while the funder will also share 50%. In some instances, it is that the person, organization, or government the risking will provide some form of buffer, such that when there are defaults or debts, they are going to take certain percentage of the fund. But this time around, I think what the government wants to do really is that for state government to come up and share the fund with the commercial banks or perhaps the federal government, so that by the time the fund is released to the MSMEs and there are issues, they will now share the risk together. And to me, it's a good initiative coming up this time.
Okay, so, the recent policies of the CBN has been termed hawkish on businesses for a couple of years now. So one might understand why the government might be willing to actually float this particular fund initiative. But then a couple of people are asking, why has the government decided to launch this initiative now that MSMEs or SMEs, so to speak, are in a critical condition?
I think it is important to also know that government must have been looking at how to support MSMEs across board, and they discovered that at the moment it's almost impossible for MSMEs to access funds from the commercial banks because of the very high interest rates. It's about 30% at the moment, and that is not that is very on business for MSMEs. So I think in their wisdom, they have now decided to also look at how to bring down the interest rate by de-risking the sector or funding to the sector. And I also want to believe that this must have been part of the outcomes of their study of the MSME ecospace. But for some of us who are key players in the industry or in the sector, we feel that coming up to just say that the sector will be the risk for funding may not. We feel that more still needed to be done if we must get the kind of expectations we hope to have. Over the years, so many interventions, so many initiatives have come from government, both at the national level and subnationals, to see how they can support MSMEs with access to funding. Billions, if not trillions of naira have gone down the drain over the decades to support MSMEs. But you now begin to wonder, what's the impact in the MSME sector? Has it actually contributed to their growth, to their development? Has it been able to birth more MSMEs in the country? The answer is relatively no. And for that reason, it means that there's something somewhere that needed to be fixed. There's still a gap that government needs to fix. And they cannot fix that gap alone. They cannot identify that gap alone without working so strongly with the key stakeholders in that sector. Yes, key stakeholders in the sector needs to be engaged. It needs to be collaborated with if we must change the narrative. And at this time, our concern should be changing the narrative, not doing one same thing over and over again, and getting the same results.
Well, you just talked about how this de-risking fund will solve some perennial issues on the domestic front. But then can this fund act as a buffer against external pressure, such as, the 14% U.S. tariff on certain Nigerian goods, which disproportionately affects small businesses engaged in international trade?
Of course, yes. It's going to serve as a buffer against a lot of shocks here and there. One of it is the tariff that you mentioned, the new tariff from the U.S. government. If we have fund, if the MSME have fund to work, because one of the critical challenge of MSMEs has always been access to finance. So if that is demystified, it will be easier for us to begin to look for new markets where Nigerian MSMEs can begin to push their products. We have a lot of opportunities, particularly in Africa, through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. One of the mitigating factors against exploring this opportunity to the fullest is the issue of finance for MSMEs. So if we have this de-risking fund coming up this time and it is being channeled and monitored in a way that it will be impactful, we see it that the new tariff may have little or no effect on the Nigerian MSMEs because we have so many markets. In fact, looking inward, even in Nigeria here, we have not been able to satisfy the market demand. And this is because we have a lot of MSMEs who do not have funds to operate. And you also know that by the time that the tariff war starts fully, countries like China and the rest will now begin to see how they can push their product more into Nigeria. We should be able to prepare MSMEs to be able to cope with the load of dumping that will be happening now in Nigeria and other African countries. One of the ways we can begin to prepare for this is to empower MSMEs with funding so that they can produce more of what they are doing, they can be more productive and more competitive in their way of doing their business. Funding plays a key role in this. And I think this de-risking initiative will support MSMEs to be able to prepare and cope with the impending shocks that will come in the next few months or year to be.
I'm still more concerned about the kind of market that MSMEs might have or have access to, because if you're having U.S. tariffs breathing down on domestic manufacturers and you're having a China market that's trying to gain inroad and pump its products into the Nigerian market, and the AFCFTA not really, opening up the vista for Nigerian products to reach other African countries, where would the Nigerian market where would the products from Nigeria see the kind of market that can help it export its commodities or its produce for more financial gains?
Well, at the moment, governments is doing their best to see that we take advantage of the AFCTA arrangement, the African Continental Free Trade Area arrangement, whereby we can begin to now sell our products to more people. In Africa alone, we have over 1 billion people that we can sell our products to, and that's a lot of market. That's a big market. I think government is not now looking at how to tweak our trade policies to be able to support Nigerian MSMEs so that we can be more competitive, and at the same time, not make Nigeria a dumping ground for other countries who now see Nigeria as a destination point to bring their goods because of the tariff war going on. I also want to believe that government too is also not looking at working through the national level alone, but also sensitizing the state government, the subnational, to be able to support the different MSMEs in the different states we have in Nigeria. We, the associations too, the Business Membership Association, are also preparing our members to be more competitive, to improve their standards, their packaging and all of that, so that we can also begin to take advantage of this new opportunity coming from the tariffs. For us, it's a time for opportunities. We don't see it as a big challenge. Rather, we see it as an opportunity for us to be able to now sell better and compete more favorably with our peers. We are also looking forward to a time where government will begin to support export strategically. Government must be intentional about supporting exporters of particularly Nigerian goods and services, and ensuring that those exports are not just raw, but value-added export that will help us be able to raise FX for the country and improve the financial situations of the MSME in the country. If the government decides to walk around the table and decide to also ensure that these policies around the trade policies are done in food and with a strong handshake and full collaboration with the key stakeholders in the MSME sector, I think we are going to get it right this time. And we'll be able to now push our products to the shores of Africa and beyond, and support our MSMEs to be able to raise our GDP by doing more in export and bringing in more FX.
All right. So now, while the de-risking fund holds promise, I mean, one major concern is the lack of clarity that we've seen on fund's operational details over time. But then looking at this particular funding, will there be specific eligibility criteria for SMEs to access this fund? I remember in time past, you talking about some government policies and how it is not reaching the actual stakeholders or the business owners that are actually in need of these interventions. I'm hoping this would be a departure from that.
Well, that's our prayer too. That's our hope that it will be a departure from the norm. At the moment, we do not have the data to show what exactly the government wants to, the path they want to take when it comes to this de-risking fund. We also do not have the master plan on how they want to go about it. And that's one of the things we're talking about. For you to be bringing out a policy or initiative like this, we expect that we also should be in the loop and be able to co-create policies like this with you, co-implement, co-monitor, and co-evaluate at the end of the exercise. That we have not been able to do with this the risking fund as it is with many other initiatives in the past. For us, if we're not intentional about it, if we're not doing it rightly, we may get the same result we have been getting over time. Over the decades, the funding programs, funding initiative has not been impactful. For us, it's more or less like a lot of money going down the drain. We need to do it differently this time. We need to ensure that the right people get the fund, because most times it is not the real MSMEs that get the fund. We also need to ensure that they are monitored in a way that the money is used for its intended purpose and it is being evaluated at the end of the exercise. And information from the evaluation is used to be able to rejig the policy such that when next we're bringing up new policies, those outcomes will help us to design the policies in a way that will be more effective. So it should also not be a one-size-fits-all. You will remember that in the MSME sector, we have different strata, particularly those in the formal sector have not been able to access funding from government. Maybe because the documentation has been very cumbersome, maybe because mode of application has been beyond their level. We feel this time it should be done in a way that particularly the informal sector can benefit. We also must say here and now, we also must say here and now that it is important for government to understand the real needs of the MSMEs. Many of this funding are just going down the drain because it is not addressing the real needs. One of the ways it can be done is making sure that the funds are being given out in phases and not one and for all. Giving it out in phases will help us to monitor the development being used by the fund in the different MSME space and ensuring that this MSME fund are tailored to the different needs of the different sector of the MSME fund, MSME ecosystem. For example, those in agriculture, their needs is different from those in the fashion design and all of that. We need to study these different sectors and see that we tweak the products of financing for this sector to be bespoke for what they need. Maybe finally, we also need to ensure that when these funds are being disbursed, other support systems are put in place. One of which is building the capacity of those who need the fund, ensuring that they are trained on soft skills, they are trained on different mechanisms that they would need to run their business, marketing, financial literacy, communication, and all of that. If this is done, I feel that the story will change this time.
Well, I don't know how optimistic financial institutions in Nigeria are, just the way you are with the postulations that you've presented. But then let me just ask you now, for some banks that are traditionally hesitant now to lend to MSMEs due to perceived high risks, can this funding plan, when you look at the plan, can it help expand credit access from them? Do they also share in this optimism? Are they also willing to provide the funds to actually narrow the about $32.2 billion MSME credit gap that we've seen?
Yes, that's our hope too. We believe that with the risking coming up now to the MSME ecosystem, commercial banks, not even commercial banks alone, all investors will be more interested now in giving funds to the MSMEs. That should help us increase more access to funding. And this is because they now know that if there are risks, they will not be the only one sharing the risk or carrying the burden. It will be shared across board, particularly with state government and other stakeholders. And I think that's a good one that can really boost MSME access to loan and funding. Again, too, you discover that one of the things that stops commercial banks from really wanting to access funds to MSMEs because they feel that the sector is not profitable enough. With the support system that I mentioned before, which has been put in place, you will discover that the banks will be more interested in touching the MSMEs. Now their hands are off also so many times, and we feel that it's time for us to begin to do something about it if we want to actually activate that sector. That's the backbone of the economy. The MSMEs must just be given all the support that they need if you want our economy to change, if you want to continue to create jobs, if you want to reduce poverty, if you want to make our GDP to also grow. Commercial banks are designed for profit making, but then at the same time, government must also let them know that as much as they are there to make profit, they must also support the economy by supporting the MSME sector. It is not going to be all profit affair when it is the MSME sector. There must be some CSR in place to support the MSME. And part of the CSR is dedicating a percentage of their profit to intentionally and strategically fund the MSME sector. As long as we don't have that kind of policy in place, it may be difficult to get the outcomes we want.
Okay, so let's look at the downside of this. Now, we understand that the initiative's success hinges on effective collaboration between federal, state governments, and financial institutions. But then, if poorly managed, what are the risks involved?
You discover that most of the entrepreneurs in Nigeria do not really have confidence and trust in government because over the years, so much fund has been earmarked to support the sector without the MSMEs actually getting the fund. So there is this lack of trust. So if this fails again, it will go on to bridge that gap, and that is not going to be good for the government. It will bridge that gap. It will go on to widen that gap, to widen that gap of confidence, widen that gap of trust, which is not good for anybody. So another thing again is that if it is done and it is not getting the right result this time, investors too will be scared, and that will scare away investors. Investors are there on the watch, looking at how government is going to run the initiative this time, and if they get it right, they will also be encouraged to come on board and support. Even the private sector are all there ready to support this initiative if government does it right. But if it is done the other way around, definitely it will scare them away, and it will be the loss of the MSMEs. The MSMEs stand to lose the more because that sector is underfunded, is underdeveloped, and we need funding this time, affordable and accessible funding to be able to keep running the business. If you look at the data we have now, almost 2 million businesses has gone under, either because they are ailing or they are dead, because of the so many challenges that we face. Is finance, access to finance. So if government can solve these, it will be that governments have been able to solve a larger portion of the challenges that MSME have.
Okay, so Dr. Egbesola, you've actually spoken profoundly about what government needs to do to ensure the success of this particular fund, but you've not talked about what you will be doing in your own capacity, your association, to actually see to the success of this. But then, let me just bring this, let me put it to you this way. I mean, we've seen arguments talk about the fact that, if there's no robust safeguards, that this fund could be vulnerable to fraud or misallocation. You've also talked about a data-driven process that is lacking in interventions like this. So as the president of small business owners in Nigeria, what will you be doing in your own capacity to prevent any misnomalies?
Well, like I mentioned in the course of my submission the other time, we are already preparing our members for the funding initiative. You remember that about 2 weeks ago, the government also announced a fund gotten from the World Bank to support MSMEs, ongoing to the Federal Government Bank of Industry Intervention Fund. Now we have the rate scheme being announced. All the way we've been preparing our members to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. For them to be able to take advantage, it means that they must also be able to position their business to be able to access the fund. So we've been doing a lot about capacity building, because we also believe that one of the key challenges that MSME has is the issue of capacity. Even if you give them the money and they don't have the capacity to make good use of the money, it will be more or less a waste at the end of the exercise. So we're building their capacity all around to be able to do business the right way. We're also working strongly now with the informal sector. We want to do our best to migrate those in the informal sector to formal by structuring the business for them. So we're doing a lot of hand-holding with the informal sector players so that they can also be positioned to be able to access this fund. We're also doing a lot of advocacy with government, advocacy about collaboration, the need for them to collaborate more with the private sector, particularly those of us in the business membership associations who are the umbrella body of these MSMEs. We're doing a lot of advocacy for them to work with us, for them to co-create these policies with us and co-implement it with us. We've also been working with government on ensuring that the digitalization is brought into the process, advocating for that, and ensuring that we have a central portal or central system whereby funding will always be done. Not that funding will be coming today from CBN, tomorrow from NESAL, next tomorrow from Bank of Industry, and all of that. And they do not, at the end of the day, have the right data to actually monitor the exercise over time and come out with better outcomes that will help to improve future funding for the MSME sector. We've also been advocating the need for government to work with business development support partners, we call them BDSPs. Yes, BDSPs is business support development providers. It's important for government to also work with this because as much as government is working and they're not providing this other side of the services of support, these MSMEs may not be able to make the best use of the fund. So we on our own, we're also training consultants to be more proactive when it comes to funding MSMEs, when it comes to supporting MSMEs, and when it comes to helping them to make the best of the fund that comes to them, whether from government or from commercial institutions, from other investors and the likes. Okay. We're also ensuring too that we create a pathway for our members to be able to access this fund because the processing, documentation, and all of that is one of the reasons why many of them are being debarred from accessing the fund. To help them to ensure that all the necessary documents are being gotten, all the necessary access are being understood by them, and then maybe finally we also help them to look for alternative funds. We help them to see that it is not only government that will bring out the fund, it is not only commercial banks that will bring out the fund. There are so many alternative means of funding your business. We open them to these alternative funding platforms and we help them and hold them to be able to access it.
All right, so finally, as the MSME sector in Nigeria overcome the hurdle around, financial instability, I'm talking about inflation now and naira depreciation, because I know that used to be a challenge, most especially for the manufacturing sector.
I did not get that question right.
Okay, so I said as the manufacturing industry, should I just say the MSME, have they actually, scaled the hurdle around the biting impact of inflation and naira depreciation? That used to be a challenge with the sector for a while.
Yes, the impact is still there. We are still feeling the heat so very seriously because although inflation is stabilized for some time now, but it is still very, very high compared to other economies. It's still very, very high. And that, to some extent, makes us uncompetitive or less competitive. At the same time, too, the average man on the streets do not have enough funds this time to purchase what they want. So they prioritize their purchases or their expenditure, which is affecting really the manufacturing industry. So if you look at a lot of warehouse now, they're being jam-packed with products without the market buying it. And that has led to some form of downsizing, at times even sacking some of the employees so as to remain afloat. But as that is going, we've also learned that we must also draw the line between what government can do for us and what we can do for ourselves. One of the things we can do for ourselves is to become more creative, more innovative in the way we market and produce our products. We are taking advantage of other means of gaining more access to market. We're now pushing our products to other African countries and even to the international communities where we can sell our product at better prices and foreign exchange and improve our revenue and profitability. And that has helped us a great deal to remain afloat. We've been able to also work a lot on standardization. We've been able to improve our standards such that they can compete with any other product anywhere from the world, even in the US. And that has also helped us to be competitive. And at the same time, looking for inward to get our input, our raw materials from locally sourced materials here, instead of depending, as we used to do before, on imported machineries and all of that.
All right.
We're doing a lot of backward integration.
All right. Well, we hope that this de-risking funding initiative will actually bring about success and growth of MSMEs in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Dr. Femi Egbesola, President, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria, for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.